Hey, what's going on YouTube? I'm Jake with DTF Fishing, bringing you guys a brand new video for a brand new series called Just a Tip. And if you guys like to throw the wacky rig, I've got just a tip for you. Now in this series, I'm going to try to bring you guys some useful tips, many of which you might have seen before on other channels, but I'm really going to make an effort to innovate and bring some stuff to the table that you guys have never seen before. So make sure you guys subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss another Just a Tip video, because I'm definitely going to bring you guys some original ideas. Now today's hack is not an original idea of mine, but it's something that early into my fishing career really helped me, and I learned it from a YouTube video, so I'm deciding today to pass that knowledge along to you guys, and it's a very, very useful tip, especially if you like throwing the wacky rig. Now I think today that every bass fisherman already knows that the wacky rig can be a very effective technique. But the traditional wacky rigging methods do have their pitfalls, and the main one is going to be losing a bunch of worms. Now even if you're a billionaire and can afford to buy endless packs of Senkos, you still don't want to go littering the bottom of your lake with hundreds of Senkos. It's overall bad for the ecosystem. Now there are basically two primary methods for wacky rigging. One of them is to take the hook straight through the middle of the worm, and the other is to use an O-ring. Both methods aren't going to prevent you from getting a strike, but you're going to lose a lot more worms doing it the old school way. So if you've got your hook straight through the middle of the worm, immediately upon inserting the hook, you're weakening the integrity of that worm. It's gonna last you one fish, maybe two, but then it's gonna be gone, because when the bass pulls on that worm, it's very likely gonna rip it right off the hook. See, here's a fish coming right now. He grabs the worm and rips it. Grabs the worm and rips it. Grabs the worm and rips. Right there. It's actually a little bit salty, but not too bad. Now your second old school wacky rigging method is going to be the O-ring, and it's typically applied with one of these O-ring tubes. You basically just slide the worm in till you get to that halfway mark. You take your O-ring and roll it down onto the worm, pop it off like so, and now you've got a ring position right there in the center of the worm. Just like that. Now prior to the more recent innovations, they had O-rings that allowed your hook to be perpendicular to the worm as it should be, and having the hook positioned that way does increase your hookup ratio, but you're still gonna lose worms using this method, and I'll show you how. Fish comes along, grabs your worm. We already know that thing doesn't work, but it's gonna pull the worm and it slides right out of that ring just like that. Now I'd say that method is still gonna be about twice as effective when it comes to not losing Senkos as that first method of rigging it straight through the worm, but you're still gonna lose a lot of Senkos. Maybe 2, 3, 4 fish at most, and that worm is gone. All right, now let's get right into today's tip. You're gonna need a handful of things, some of which you probably already have. You're gonna need a pair of scissors, and unless you're court ordered not to own a pair of scissors because of that one time you tried to stab Daryl, you've got some laying around the house. The next thing you're gonna need is some 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch heat shrink tubing. If you're gonna be using it primarily for Senkos or your typical worms, you wanna go with the 3/8 inch. It's the nearest fit. 1/2 inch is a little bit more versatile. I use 1/2 inch because when it shrinks down, it's a little tougher, and also you can use it on bigger baits, which I'm experimenting with some things like applying this technique to the nose of swim baits for some drop shots and other stuff like that, other soft plastics that are a little bit bigger, but 3/8 inch is really the way to go if you're using it for worms. The next thing you're gonna need is a heat source, and for that I recommend a heat gun. This is a heat gun that I got cheaply off of Amazon, and you're gonna wanna get one of these. They're useful for a lot of different things, not just for this, so it won't be a stupid purchase, but you're not gonna wanna use anything that produces an open flame, and you're not gonna wanna use your mom's hair dryer. I'm gonna show you what happens when you use those things in just a minute. Now when it comes to the heat shrink wrap, you're gonna wanna go with clear color so it preserves that color of the worm. The next time we have open water up here in Michigan, I am gonna experiment with some colored heat shrink wrap, a little chartreuse maybe, just to add a little bright spot right on the hook. See if that increases the hookup ratio, giving them that target, that bright spot right on the hook. But for your general purposes, clear is the way you wanna go. Now the process from here is pretty simple. You wanna take your heat gun and plug it in. The air that comes out of it gets hot quickly, so you don't need to wait for it to heat up or anything like that. Just set it down on the table. Mine comes with this neat little stand. You just kind of kick it up. It's like a little kickstand for the heat gun. And all you're gonna do is cut off about a 1/2 inch section of that heat shrink wrap, place it on the center of your worm. You're gonna hold your worm out in front of that heat gun, and you're just gonna roll it until it shrinks down flush with the worm. Now as long as you don't sit there applying the heat directly for like 20 minutes, it's not gonna damage the worm, it's not gonna weaken the integrity of it or anything like that. It's just gonna shrink that tube flush with the worm and make it nice and secure. And now let's take a look at some of the other heating methods that I've seen suggested on YouTube by other creators. One of these is gonna be your mom's, your wife's, your girlfriend's hair dryer. And unless they've got a Millennium Falcon Turbo Dryer 9000, that thing, well, just take a look and see what's gonna happen.
A little longer than a few minutes later. 346 minutes later. 1 eternity later.
Now I had that hairdryer on the hottest setting, and unless you want to spend 20 to 30 minutes getting that heat shrink wrap to cling to that worm, it's a complete waste of time. At the 1 minute mark, you've already spent way too much time doing it. Now another method I've seen suggested on YouTube is to use a lighter, just an open flame to get that heat shrink wrap to cling down. And an open flame is certainly going to be hot enough to get that heat shrink wrap to shrink down, but it's going to burn and blacken that plastic and leave an overall bad smell, which I'm sure is also going to leave a bad taste for the fish. Stick with the heat gun. Mine works really well. It was only like $20 on Amazon. There's a link down in the description for the one that I purchased. And yes, it costs $20 for the heat gun, and the whole purpose here is to save money by not losing worms, but over the course of a couple years, it's going to more than pay for itself. And as I said before, the heat gun is useful for a lot of different things. I've already personally used it for some other projects. If you guys do any work with resin, it's really good for popping the bubbles in resin and stuff like that. You can use it for lure making. There's a lot of different things you can use the heat gun for. So in summary, make sure you guys use a heat gun. Don't try to use a hairdryer. Don't try to use a lighter. Both of them are dumb. Once you've done this, you're ready to put your hook on the worm. Now, there's a variety of hooks that you can use, and people have their different preferences. I don't think there's really a super wrong way to go about it, but ultimately I'd stick with something that's a wide gap hook. I really like to use the Wacky weedless jig head. Gives it a little bit of weight, increases that flutter on the way to the bottom, gets it down there a little bit quicker, and really lets you give it a little more kick when you're jigging it off the bottom, all while keeping it weedless and avoiding those snags. I like to put the hook in and out of that plastic really quickly and not through the center of the worm. Really leaves more of the hook exposed, and in my experience, gives you a better hookup ratio. Now that we're all finished, I'm gonna give this thing a hard tug. As you can see, the worm is in there nice and secure. I could have shrank this down even a little bit more probably. Remember, I'm using 1/2 inch. 3/8 is really the way to go for worms like this. And as you can see, there's no way that that hook is gonna pull out of there. Even if you snag, it's not coming off. You're gonna have to break this off in order to lose that worm. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the first video in the Just a Tip series. I got a lot of plans for this series, ranging from advice for beginners all the way to expert tips and tricks. I'll probably even make some videos specifically about how to get started making fishing videos for YouTube. I've also got ice fishing videos coming, more unboxings, more tips and tricks, you name it. If you guys have any ideas for this series or for anything else you want to see on the channel, let me know down in the comments. The channel's still brand new and I'm very open to suggestions. I want to make you guys happy, so let me know what you want to see. Hope you guys have an awesome new year and catch a lot of big fish. We're gonna set some PBs this year, I can feel it. I'll see you guys in the next video.